I was leaving the bar, was very, very drunk. Someone I'd known from years before turned up claiming to be my girlfriend, and I didn't have any kind of recollection of her being my girlfriend. And yeah, like I lost an hour of my life somewhere, and then I just couldn't let it go. I just kept playing it over and over in my mind, trying to work out what had happened in that hour.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. I'm here to share with you the beautiful transmissions from the walls of my cavernous heart and to witness the great frequency shift that we are moving into as a collective and the beautiful deep work that we are doing as we glide into the age of Aquarius. This is the Liminal Frequencies podcast. Let's go. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jillian Rimmons. I'm an Akashic Records guide and a practitioner of healing modalities. And I'm here to help you make this transition from 3 dimensions to 5 dimensions a little bit breezier. And today we're going to be talking to Mark Stubbles. And Mark is a well-renowned hypnotherapist. And he practices NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and mindfulness meditation. He has produced several courses and has helped many clients to stop smoking, lose weight, and increase confidence with the use of hypnosis. As somebody who once suffered with chronic anxiety, using hypnotherapy to help people overcome anxiety and depression is his passion. Now let's talk a little bit about the context of where we're at in space and time right now, because it's interesting. I pick up these podcasts and they're not exactly linear. This especially is not linear. It's been a while since our conversation, but as we stand today, we're going through a square between Jupiter and Neptune, and we just went through a square between Jupiter and Saturn. And this square process, it's not exactly linear either. It may last for a few days. And so what I'm noticing in this timeline around Jupiter and Saturn and how that's conjuncting Neptune as we pass through, Jupiter is amplifying everything, especially in Cancer. It's amplifying our emotional body and how we respond and react to things. So this can mean depression and anxiety. This can mean feeling like you're underwater. We already have Mercury in Cancer, and the moon is going to do a new moon in Cancer. And we'll have the sun in Cancer within the next few days. It's going to be a lot. And if anybody knows me well, I track the moon cycles throughout my week. I look at where the moon is. The moon spends 2 days in each sign. And Cancer moons are not easy for me. I believe this could have something to do with letting go. This is my 12th house. But I'm just noticing as I track the moon cycles what brings me more discomfort. And those are the times when I'm probably doing the best work and really digging in. You know, when a picnic for the ego is not a productive day for the soul. So looking at this, it reminded me of the story of Medusa. And Medusa was a Gorgon from this liminal realm that existed between the sea and the sky. These beings had wings, but they're also kind of like sea creature. And she actually was raised as this beautiful maiden. She was not like her family, which is very ominous. If you grow up in a family and all of your family members are beasts and you're like this human looking thing. And so she actually made her way to a temple of Athena just to worship the goddess Athena. Athena is the virgin goddess, and as well as the goddess of the hunt. She had this beautiful temple and she was worshiping there, and Poseidon came into the temple and confronted her, and he wanted to have relations with her. Very clinical. He wanted to have relations with her and she declined. And so he ended up forcing himself on her and raping her. And after this happened, Athena actually turned her into a horrible beast. And she had the most beautiful hair. And Athena turned her hair into snakes. So she had these horrendous snakes around her head. And she was this scary beast that whenever she looked at somebody, she would turn them into stone. And so for me, looking at this story and looking at trauma and how trauma can completely disassociate us and shift us out of our body, even in a way that it may be activating the protector parts. If you look at the protector parts as the snakes and the venom and the gaze of somebody turning them into stone, we can see that this is a huge mechanism of protection against the sexual abuse that occurred. And so the Greeks really show us this literal representation of what happens when we encounter trauma. But for us, we might not see the subtleties until over time we realize that we're a little different. We have a little more muscle tension. Our energy is a little bit different. We're not as soft anymore. And I'm sure many of us have gone through, I've gone through this, feeling that loss of that softness and gentleness and femininity in the process of going through a hard process. So I see you if you are going through a hard process. If you're not going through a hard process and you're walking in the sunshine, then that's so beautiful. And just hold this in your cup of tools and resources that you might need are you to come in contact with a beast like Medusa or like Poseidon and in the deepest waters. So let's put on our goofiest snorkeling mask and we're going to dive into the waters of Cancer as we connect with Mark and his hypnotherapy practice. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Julia. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very well.
Good.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I wanted to start, since it's the morning here, with a morning practice. Do you have something that you like to tap into?
What you were just doing then, the deep breaths, breathing all the way down into your stomach, breathing out with a big sigh. I always recommend that people make the conscious effort to try and breathe into their stomach as much as possible. Doing so, you're going to notice more relaxation overall in your life. If you ever watch someone sleeping, you'll notice it's their stomach that rises and falls as they breathe in and out. So belly breathing is how we breathe when we are relaxed. So yes, belly breathing. I find that very, very soothing, very relaxing, very grounding. So I think that's a good thing to start with.
Yeah, it helps us to drop into embodiment, I feel, and just be more grounded. And sometimes I think of it myself as like a bear. You're just being with the earth and connecting and yawning and stretching, and it's a good way to treat yourself in the morning, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk about your journey into hypnotherapy and inner child work.
I became a hypnotherapist in 2018. I became interested in hypnotherapy because of I had many issues in my life. I had a lot of anxiety. I had social problems. I had issues with blushing. I had all kinds of relationship problems. I found myself in a very toxic relationship, which resulted in a very difficult divorce. And then I found myself being stalked, and it just reached a point where I decided that things needed to change. Also had a lot of problems with my family after my divorce. Cost me a lot of money. My ex-wife made it very difficult for me to see my daughter, so I had to keep going backwards and forwards through the family court system, which was a nightmare, cost me a lot of money. So I was living with my grandparents and they started deteriorating, their minds started deteriorating. And yeah, I just witnessed things with the family unit that made me realize, why I'd always had issues growing up, how I developed the anxiety and relationship problems that I'd experienced. And that was when I did looking into hypnotherapy and found it useful, found it helpful. I tried other therapy methods. I tried counseling, which just didn't really work for me. Hypnotherapy was the only thing that I found I got benefit from. So that was what I decided to study and to become a hypnotherapist.
Wow. And was there like one moment that you had, or, tell me about your breakthrough experience where you either experienced hypnotherapy or you felt something within you ready to shift or shifting?
In 2014, I had I don't know if you could call it a mystical experience or a spiritual experience. I still don't know, what happened, but yeah, that for me was that was really the turning point. Oh yeah, as I said, I had a couple of stalkers, and I don't I don't know how to describe it. It was a very mystical experience. If I wanted to relay it back to something, a man put a curse on me when I was 18, and this was said he put a curse on me when I was 18, and this event that happened, I relayed it back to that because that was the only other, that was the only other person I'd met who was that way. So I relayed it back to that. And yeah, that was really the turning point for me. That was really when I decided that I had to change.
Wow. And what do you mean by mystical? You had like a coming back into your body or a leaving your body.
Yeah, I don't, I don't want to, go too much into it, but I was out one night in Windsor, which is, you may know Windsor, it's where the Queen used to live,
Okay.
Windsor Castle. And I was drinking, and someone who I had known from years before. I was leaving the bar, was very, very drunk. Someone I'd known from years before turned up claiming to be my girlfriend, and I didn't have any kind of recollection of her being my girlfriend. And yeah, like I lost an hour of my life somewhere, and then I just couldn't let it go. I just kept playing it over and over in my mind, trying to work out what had happened in that hour. And the more I tried to work it out, the weirder it got. So, yes.
Wow. And when did things shift for you? Like, was that the moment where you were like, wow, something needs to change in my life?
Yeah, that was when things started to shift for me. It wasn't until maybe a year after that when I saw this woman again and had another strange encounter that I kept again trying to work out what had happened, couldn't make sense of it. That was when I started as I said, that was when I started listening to hypnosis recordings. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to talk to a counselor or anyone like that because I had a lot of shame. Um, when a child grows up with dysfunction, they internalize that dysfunction. It creates toxic shame. So I had a lot of toxic shame. I didn't want to
Where do you think that came from?
my childhood.
Yeah, yeah, just memories that you had repressed.
Yeah, not I wouldn't say repress. Until that point, if you'd have asked me about my childhood, I knew it wasn't a happy childhood, but I didn't realize the extent to which it had affected my life. Because of my childhood, I rushed into a relationship with someone that I shouldn't have rushed into when I was far too young, and that caused the toxic marriage and the toxic divorce. And yeah, I maybe got involved with people that the red flags were there, like with one of the girls that ended up stalking me. We
Mm-hmm.
did have a relationship, and very early on in that
Mm-hmm.
relationship, she was constantly texting me, calling me. The red flags were there that this wasn't
Mm-hmm.
someone that I should get involved with. But
And you were both like drawing in the healing that was needed from that
yeah,
karmic exchange, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's some kind of parallel reality and this other version of you is the person that she recognized, the woman that was trying to contact you?
At the time, I thought that that was what was going on. Yes, I didn't. As I said, there was, someone when I was 18 who I thought he was crazy, that he put a curse on me. It wasn't until that event in 2014 that I maybe started to take it seriously. And at that time, I didn't know what was going on. I do know that my mother abused me when I was a baby, and I do know that she caused me issues with dissociation. Some
Okay.
people have told me that I have a kind of second personality going on. So the explanation that psychology would put on it would be that it is I was dissociating, and maybe to the extreme, having a
Okay.
relationship with someone that I didn't know I was in a relationship with.
Okay. Wow, that's so interesting.
Yes.
I've
But
never heard a story like that.
yeah. But as I say, at the time, I still not 100% certain that it's not, as you said, a separate universe or.
There's always a spiritual and a regular explanation for everything. You know, we can go down this scientific path and say, like, yeah, perhaps you're disassociating. And you could also go down the spiritual path and say, like, that your spirit was actually disassociated in that moment
Mhm.
and that you had trauma. When we have trauma, like, our spirit often disassociates because to protect us from that impact. And
Mhm.
then, with my work, which is probably similar to what you understand with your inner child work and hypnotherapy, is that people are trailing around these parts of them from their childhood that like didn't get to have a voice or didn't get to show up. And that until we give those parts of ourselves a seat at the table to come and be integrated into the whole, we still have this disconnection or disassociation from ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. When you experience trauma as a child, a part of you is going to be split off.
Yeah.
So the inner child work I do, I have a 4 week inner child program, and we look to work with all ages of the inner child from infant to adolescent to reintegrate all of those parts.
Yeah, so I'm interested how this bridge between this moment of disassociation, and when you said you found a practitioner that
Hmm.
you eventually worked with for hypnotherapy.
Hmm.
And what was what were the moments that you really felt like you were able to come back to yourself, or the shift?
There's been so many. There has
Mm.
been so many. Um, my confidence improved, massively. I was able to start, doing things on my own now. I'm traveling, been traveling since 2021, being, all around the world, something that I would never have been able to do previously. I would never have had the confidence to do it previously. I would always have been focusing on the worst case scenario, always looking for things to go wrong.
Right.
Um, and yeah, with regards to that spiritual experience, in one of the memories that I tried to recall, that was one of the things that was really a big turning point for me when she said to me, you'll always have what you need, just have faith. And I decided to live my life by that, make that a belief. And I've always had what I needed. So
I love it. Oh, one of my staff told me that her word of the year was believe. That
mhm.
even if you feel like you're delusional, you have to believe that the crazy dreams and ideas that you have are going to work out and come together. And constantly, I believe we get tested in how we can trust the universe, how we can trust the divine plan. And we have to surrender to that. Otherwise, we're interjecting our will and our demands on it, and that doesn't usually work out.
Absolutely. Our beliefs create our reality.
Yeah. So the way I understand hypnotherapy is that we're working inwardly to transform that reality that we have, the
Hmm.
beliefs of what we are believing is possible.
Hmm.
And then once we work with that inner reality, our outer reality will reflect that.
Absolutely. Hypnotherapy works on so many um, levels, particularly with childhood trauma. When a child experiences trauma, the emotional part of their brain increases in size and the thinking part of their brain decreases in size, making them more prone to issues with emotional regulation, anxiety. Um, and we also become shamed out of our emotions in childhood, through school. You don't even have to have dysfunctional parents to be shamed out of your emotions. You'll be shamed out of them in school by society. Society tells us that if we feel anxious or sad, means there's something wrong with us, that we need to take
Right.
medication.
The most traumatic thing is to disassociate or avoid your emotions and try
Absolutely.
and write them off as like I think another thing is toxic positivity,
Mm-hmm.
where we feel that we need to show up 100% of the time feeling super positive.
Mm-hmm.
And when something happens that's really hard, we go the direction of toxic positivity or even spiritual bypass, and we say, "No, this is all good. This is part of the plan." And we cheat ourselves of the opportunity to feel those emotions that then we store them in a deeper pocket, and it's just never good. It doesn't feel good uh, to not feel those things.
Absolutely. All emotions serve a purpose. They're there to let us know when something's wrong or get us out of danger.
Yeah.
Um, so, yes, one of the ways hypnosis can help is because it can be very relaxing. Um, and the more a person takes time to relax, the more they are going to start to re regulate their brain, shrink the size of their amygdala, grow the size of their hippocampus, the thinking part of the brain, the less prone they will be to emotional dysregulation. So yeah, the more you take time to relax, the easier it becomes to relax. And it contains an element of mindfulness as well, allowing a person to detach from their thoughts and their feelings. And yeah, before 2014, I was totally associated with my thoughts and my feelings. Um, as I said, I had a lot of shame, about things that had been put in my head by other people. I'd internalized the belief that, it wasn't good enough. There was something wrong with me. Again, a child, as I said, internalizes dysfunction. They don't want to see their parents as bad. So they see themselves as bad, which creates that toxic hypnosis, allows a person to see those thoughts and feelings as separate from themselves, not be controlled by those thoughts and feelings.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of separating yourself from that because
Mm-hmm.
I did a past life regression yesterday and I'm a Capricorn moon. I'm very like motivated and hardworking, and it's ingrained in me from the society and my family, and everybody's hardworking. So
Mm-hmm.
I had this past life regression that I was a horse, and the horse is getting hit and just all kinds of things that keep going forward. And
Mm-hmm.
what my guide said was, have you separated yourself from the horse? And we attended the same program on the Akashic Records. So I'm the horse, and then I just bring my hands, I push myself away from the horse, and now I can
Mm-hmm.
actually interact with the horse and see the horse and ask the horse questions. And so with all of this stuff, we're exploring our inner world and our inner parts, our inner child, our higher self, our the guides that are within us, and our ego, which is very important. That's something that in spiritual world they say, we need to eliminate the ego, and the ego is really important to protect us, to know whose mouths to feed, as Terence McKenna said.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can actually find ourselves in this space knowing that our thoughts are one component. We're also receiving downloads and data from the universe. We're receiving data from our different parts of ourselves, which perhaps they don't really get a place at our table, like our judgment, our inner critic. They often don't get a place at our table.
Mm-hmm.
And so once we try and push those things away and cast them out, their voice gets louder. Like it's like a child growing up. If you don't let them have an opportunity to speak and express themselves, then they get crankier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I describe trying to suppress thoughts and emotions as a beach ball. If you hold a beach ball under the water and then let it go, it shoots up even higher. So what resists not only persists but becomes stronger the more you try and fight against a thought or a feeling, the more attention, the more energy you're giving it, the stronger it's going to become.
I love it. What we resist, it persists.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind sharing with us a little bit more about when you came back into your own emotions
Mm-hmm.
and feelings? Because that can't be easy.
No, it wasn't easy. Um, for me, it was a journey. It lasted 4 or 5 years. From 2014 was when I had an experience, and then, as I said, it was kind of an ongoing thing. I think that the trying to get a grip on what had happened when I first experienced it, I was very scared about my mental health. I've, you know, again, maybe the modern kind of world tells us that, if you're disconnected from reality, it means you're, schizophrenic and you need to be in some kind of institution. So I was very afraid for my mental health.
Or you're having a spiritual awakening. That is actually what happens to most people who they become healers or they have a spiritual awakening is they're seen in the Western society as they need to be locked up and they're not safe, but really they need a shaman and they need to find their way into the healing path, which is great because that's what you did.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So trying to get a grip on what had happened, trying to recall what had happened was in itself therapeutic. It was in itself teaching me to detach from my thoughts, teaching me to detach from an outcome, made me see that I'd been quite narcissistic, that maybe my motivations had been unhealthy. And so the really as soon as the event happened, healing began. And then, yeah, as I said, that carried on for about a year. And then I saw the girl again. She did something similar. It lasted again, maybe 6 months. And I started listening to Alan Watts. I started looking at a lot of Alan Watts recordings on YouTube. I've watched all of Alan Watts recordings on YouTube, I think. A lot of the Krishnamurti.
What was your favorite quote from Alan Watts?
Favorite quote? I don't know about a favorite quote, but I like how he talks about Zen, how he uses the Zen koans and tells the Zen stories. I found that very therapeutic. Yeah, I listened to everything I could find from Krishnamurti as well, and I started listening to hypnosis recordings at first on YouTube. The good thing about YouTube is once you start listening to things of a certain genre, it starts suggesting things of a similar genre. So I started listening to hypnosis recordings at first, and I found it helpful. So I decided to see a therapist. I found that even more helpful. And then I decided to actually start training in hypnotherapy. And yeah, I completed my first course in 2018 and I began practicing, just seeing stop smoking clients at first, but things persisted in, I don't know if it's the dissociation or spiritual, but strange things kept happening. So I had more hypnotherapy sessions to address those things, and I started having therapy sessions with the trainer who had done the first therapy course I went on. He was also very into past life regressions and the energy body, and he was the one that recommended that I start reading more about inner child work. And the first book he recommended to me was by a man called John Bradshaw, a book called Homecoming. And that really, the inner child work, that was probably 2020 by that point. And the inner child work was really when I started to see really big changes in my life. I started to really put things together and really understand the dynamics of the family I'd grown up in. Until that point, I'd always blamed my father, I suppose, for the issues that I'd experienced from my childhood. And he certainly wasn't perfect, but through looking at the family dynamics, I started to see that it was actually my grandmother that had really done a lot of damage. And yeah, I was able to maybe, I suppose you could say, heal my relationship with my father. I spoke to my father again for the first time in, I don't know, 10 years, and was able to improve my relationship with my parents.
Wow, that's wonderful. So tell me a little bit more about the inner child healing hypnosis.
So, the inner child healing, a child needs what are known as good enough parents. The good enough parent will provide unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. The child's going to know that they are loved and accepted no matter what, that they're going to get their needs met, that their parents are reliable, that they can trust them. Most people don't have good enough parents. Maybe 80% of people don't have good enough parents. Inner child work isn't about blame. It's not about having a victim mentality or blaming your parents, because, as I said, most people don't have good enough parents. People generally parent the way they were parents. So the trauma is generational, passed down from
Right.
one generation to the next. But inner child work isn't about blame. It's not about victim mentality. It is about becoming a good enough parent to yourself. It's about giving yourself unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, about making your inner child feel safe, feel accepted. Another reason that hypnosis is so good for this purpose is because your mind can't tell the difference between a real or an imagined event. So by using hypnosis makes it very easy to visualize, and through visualization you can actually see yourself connecting with your inner child, giving your inner child unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. So it's about becoming a good enough parent for yourself. And then the next part of the therapy session would be what's called future pacing in NLP. So visualizing yourself the way you want to be. And because your mind can't tell the difference between a real or an imagined event, the more you visualize yourself the way you want to be, you're going to create new neural pathways in your brain, and those pathways are going to become stronger and stronger the more you visualize yourself that way. You're going to actually be able to become that person.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it. This has been such a fun interview. And I have a couple more questions. The first question is, how do you suggest that people listening, if there's a practice or a technique or a thought pattern that they can initiate to connect with their liminal frequencies?
Meditation, just standard mindfulness meditation, sitting, comfortably with your back straight, focusing on your breath, noticing the air flowing in through the tip of your nose, going all the way down into your stomach, breathing out, your stomach rising and falling as you breathe in and out. Any thoughts come into your mind, just notice them, label them as thinking. And I used to like to burn some incense when I was meditating and really enjoy it. So yes, mindfulness meditation, I think, is very effective for raising frequencies, for externalizing thoughts and feelings, as we spoke about earlier. The more you do that, the more you externalize those things, see them as separate from yourself. So not only the less controlled you will be by them, but the more you will raise your frequency in that
Mm-hmm.
spiritual
And the
sense.
liminal frequencies are the really subtle frequencies, the ones that connect us to the earth, to the wind, the Schumann resonance of the earth,
Mm-hmm.
the electromagnetic resonance of our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And our thoughts, sometimes they can go into that liminal space, but oftentimes our thoughts are more of an external frequency, as much like when we're trying to connect with the earth and we're standing next to a 5G tower. It's so loud that we
Mm-hmm.
have to separate ourselves in order to tap back in. So it is a good reminder, like, to become more like and more connected to those frequencies that are more subtle. And to do that, we need to engage in some kind of practice to help us to quiet and help us to soften.
Absolutely. And there was a very nice lake that I used to go to, and camp there overnight, and yeah, just meditate and be in nature.
Yeah, it's such good medicine. So, is there
Absolutely.
anything else that listeners can do to connect with you, or is there anything you want to share with them?
Yeah, they can connect with me via my website, anxietyhypnotherapist.org, or have a Facebook group, Inner Child Healing, Breaking Free from CPTSD. They can connect with me via either of those mediums. What would I like to say to close with? I think just going back to what I said earlier, if you suffer with anxiety or negative self talk, what resists persists. So the more you try and fight against that stuff, the more energy, the more focus you're giving it, the stronger it's going to become. So don't fight it, just allow it to be. And yeah, mindfulness meditation. Um,
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure getting to know you.
no problem. Thank you very much.
That concludes our interview with Mark. And what an insightful journey through the inner child work and through the work it takes to reconnect yourself and reassociate yourself after trauma and after disassociation. And so when we look at the story, our hero, Medusa, and how it was completely injustice that she was punished by Athena for what happened to her in the Virgin Temple. But we can see there's places that this plays in that for whatever reason there was a huge injustice, and it was really felt by this character who was turned into this demon, this beast. And Perseus, who is the hero in the Trojan Wars, was the one that was sent out to take on Medusa and kill her. And Perseus was given the winged sandals from Hermes. He was given the cape of invisibility by Hades. And he was also given Medusa's shield. And the shield protected him. He was able to use it as a mirror. He could see her and make sure that he wasn't turned to stone. And he was able to convince his sisters by grabbing one of their eyes to show him where Medusa was resting. And while she was sleeping, he cut off her head, and out of her head came her 2 babies who she was pregnant from Poseidon. And these 2 babies were Chrysaor, which is this bear with this golden sword, and Pegasus, the winged horse. And so from this Neptunian tragedy comes these mythical beings that came into existence. And part of the story was that Athena heard the sisters of Medusa wailing and mourning the death of their sister. And it created such a beautiful music that she was able to actually harness this sound and use it for creating this song out of it. The interesting thing I find is that after everything is said and done and Medusa is slain, from within her head comes the inner child, the Pegasus and the Chrysaor. And as we realize that the demon itself contains the beauty within us of our inner children, and if we can just integrate those parts of ourselves, then we can too slay the beast of Medusa. Now, after everything was said and done, Medusa is killed, her head is taken to Athena, and eventually makes its way to Asclepius, who is this healing god. And he uses the blood from the right side of her head as a heal-all. And the blood from the left side of her head will, just one drop, will kill anybody. And so it's interesting how we look at the left and the right brain and how they can be so different. There can be the creative part of us and there can be the logical part of us. And this comes into play too with Saturn and Neptune being the left and the right aspect of insanity, right? We have this OCD, this hyper-focused, this vigilance within our realm of mental illness. And we also have this insanity, this delusion. And when balanced, when in light, those logical side and the creative side can be such a beautiful thing. But let's feel, and you can drop in for a moment, in these parts of ourselves, even the left and the right brain, how we move a little bit too quickly towards distortion and disassociation, and how we move a little bit too closely towards productivity, and we're too hard on ourselves, like that beaten down horse. And so as we tap into our own energy field, we can see maybe that horse running in the background, or that serpent, or that seahorse swimming, and those parts of us that haven't fully been acknowledged or expressed, and how we can integrate that into our being. Just allow yourself to have permission to feel what it is that you are truly experiencing and going through it. As if that part of you that has that feeling is the inner child, is a brand new newborn that is feeling it for the first time. Because when we can feel that part of ourselves like a child that is screaming, that is crying, that needs soothing, and we can just soften into that, then we can relax that tendency to be overzealous, to be way too hardworking, and to shame ourselves for the emotions that we're truly feeling. So thank you for showing up again and being part of this community. I am hosting a networking event on July 2nd at 12 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And the networking event is going to focus on embracing our authenticity as we move into our most aligned spiritual businesses, especially in uncertain times. And we're going to offer opportunities to meet people in the community who are working towards their highest path. And we're going to also offer an Akashic Records reading at the end so we can integrate the most authentic aspects of ourselves. I thank you for sharing the show. I thank you for leaving a 5-star review. And I thank you most importantly for making me part of your world. I'm so grateful.